Tonight, an ultimatum to Hamas from Israel. Return hostages on Saturday or the bombardment resumes. The latest threat from Benjamin Netanyahu, backed by Donald Trump, who had this message for the militants.
They either have them out by Saturday at 12 o'clock or all bets are off.
He's been meeting the King of Jordan at the White House after demanding the kingdom accepts Gaza refugees. The US president says he still wants to take Gaza, as tonight on the Strip, 2 million people fear a return to life in an active war zone. He's promising peace, but how is that even possible? Also coming up, why is Arsenal being urged to end its sponsorship deal with Rwanda after weeks of deadly violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo?
How do these different football clubs reconcile with their conscience the fact that they are being sponsored but also advertising for a country that is de facto a warmonger?
Plus, battle of the tech bros, how Elon Musk is fighting his former co-founder for control of the company that makes ChatGPT. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We've gotten used to threats and ultimatums in the past few weeks. We've gotten used to big, bold declarations too, and to the inevitable rowing back from officials the day after. Diplomacy and geopolitics have always been transactional. Now, it's just a much more blatant one since Donald Trump became president for a second time. And that has emboldened Israel's leaders. After Hamas said they would delay the planned release of 3 hostages from Gaza indefinitely, the Israeli Prime Minister put his soldiers on standby for a return to intense fighting. That's angered the families of those waiting for their loved ones to be freed and caused uncertainty for millions in Gaza who'd hoped for longer respite. But in Washington, Donald Trump went even further, suggesting that all hell would break loose if all hostages weren't freed this weekend, and insisting again, as he met one of the region's power brokers, that Gaza would come under US authority and that there would be peace in the Middle East. We'll hear from a Palestinian leader and get analysis from Washington in a moment, but let's get started with a report from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle.
The Gaza ceasefire is now at real risk of collapsing. After Hamas's threat last night to suspend further hostage releases, Benjamin Netanyahu has now raised the stakes.
The decision I passed unanimously in the cabinet is this. If Hamas does not return our hostages by Saturday noon, the ceasefire will end and the IDF will return to intense fighting until Hamas is finally defeated.
The ceasefire has lasted 24 days so far, just over halfway through the first phase. 21 hostages have been released. 73 are still in Gaza. It's not known how many of them remain alive. The images of 3 emaciated hostages released last Saturday has shocked Israel, and some are blaming Netanyahu for not agreeing a ceasefire deal sooner. It is possible that Hamas is aware of this and trying to exploit divisions within Israel. Today there were protests outside the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem, demanding that the ceasefire continue so all the hostages can be freed.
I am a mother of a boy who is a soldier and a citizen of the State of Israel, demanding from the government to do its moral duty and bring back my son home. My son that the government sent to defend the country, to bring him back home.
In Gaza, they've had 3 weeks of peace and a chance to return home and confront the destruction of their land. They now face the resumption of fighting and the growing realization they might be forced to leave altogether.
We do not want war. We want the war to stop. We've had enough of wars. We have begun to wish for death. What is the fault of our children, our young children? What is their fault? We suffered in the winter. We want the war to stop. We have enough fear.
With the fate of Gaza being decided by the US president, Jordan's king arrived at the White House today, the first Arab leader to visit Donald Trump since his inauguration. This was always going to be a difficult meeting, But within minutes of arriving, the two leaders were in front of the media in an unscheduled press conference as Donald Trump conducted diplomacy for the world to watch.
There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it.
King Abdullah, clearly not sold on Trump's plan, instead played to his ego.
Mr. President, I think we have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
Benjamin Netanyahu is on a wave of confidence after his visit to Washington last week. He is daring Hamas to back down, and if they don't, Gaza will be at war once again. Netanyahu knows that for now, he has the full backing and protection of Donald Trump, and he is emboldened. The rest of the Middle East can only watch on, seemingly helpless. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Let's go straight to our Mark Stone, who joins me live now. And Mark, I mean, this was a much anticipated meeting between the King of Jordan and Donald Trump, because, of course, for the past week, he's been teasing this idea of taking ownership over Gaza, and then the comments he made about the ceasefire breaking down, that all hell would break loose, language we've heard him use before. And, of course, for the Jordanian king, he walked quite a tightrope today of trying to appease Donald Trump, give him something, but at the same time, just be quite careful about what he was actually promising.
Yeah, and he didn't expect to be doing it in public. I thought of all the amazing moments today, and there were a few. One of them was the fact that they did that news conference, as it turned out to be, in the Oval Office, on camera, in public. None of that was planned. Up until the moments before it happened, the media were told that we were not going to be in the room at all. All we would see of the king would be him driving in and him leaving again. Well, that all changed at the last minute, which effectively meant that we got to see diplomacy happening in real time, and such awkward diplomacy as well, as you described. I mean, King Abdullah is among he and the rest of the Gulf Arab nations do not like Donald Trump's plan one little bit, but they also know they absolutely need to keep Donald Trump on side. They've learnt from his last presidency that irritating him, upsetting him, falling out with him is not a good thing, and so that he needs to be on side. And those words that were in Ali's report there from the king, where he said along the lines of, you know, we found a person in Donald Trump who genuinely can bring prosperity and peace to the Middle East. That was extraordinary. Duplicitous diplomacy, you might say. I think you could call it diplomatic foreplay, being as nice as he possibly can be to the president because he knows he needs him. But the subtext is, do you know what, Mr. President, we really don't like your plan A of taking over Gaza, of deporting all Palestinians to our lands. We hate that idea. Let's call that plan B and work on a plan A, to which Donald Trump will say, OK, fine, well, what is plan A? It certainly ain't the two-state solution that Donald Trump is fed up with now. And so therein lies the problem. What is the preferable option for Middle Eastern countries? Donald Trump will say it is that they should take some Palestinians in and that they should rebuild Gaza themselves. And maybe that is the fallback. Maybe that is the position that Donald Trump is trying to create, a negotiating position where he presents something that is unworkable. How do you take over Gaza? How can America just take over Gaza, present something that's unworkable, and then fall back from that onto something that the Palestinians, that the Arab nations can cope with? Yalda, you may well have asked, and lots of people have, like, what is it? Why is Jordan so against the idea of so many Palestinians coming to their country, or indeed Egypt to their country? There are two answers to that. One is history. It is the fact that they do not want to be seen as the countries who are complicit in a second Nakba, in the removal of Palestinians from their land to another land. They simply do not want to be part of that. But there is another much more practical reason as well, and it is the fact that if you take Jordan, I think it's 2.3 million or something Palestinians already are in Jordan. They are the people who were forced out during the first Nakba. The creation of the State of Israel from 1948 pushed so many Palestinians out of their country. The problem for King Abdullah is he knows there is literally an existential threat to his country if so many more Palestinians were to come. It's the same for any country. They cannot take in too many refugees because they worry about the stability of their own nation. So that's why he doesn't want to take them. On the flip side of that, President Trump is saying, well, hang on, if you don't take them, we will remove your funding. That, too, would create instability in Jordan. So he's in a catch-22 between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're watching this space really closely. Mark, thank you, as always. Well, joining me now from Ramallah in the West Bank is Mustafa Barghouti, leader of the Palestinian National Initiative. Mr. Barghouti, it's always good to see you. As you watch all of this play out, and of course we saw Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington at the White House last week, and then of course we've seen the Jordanian king in the last few hours with Donald Trump, those statements that were made, that tightrope that he had to walk quite publicly. What is the reaction and the response from Palestinians who are going to be directly impacted by all of these conversations that are being had about them?
Well, the reaction among Palestinians across the board, without exception, is a total rejection of Trump's plans. Let me say today, he dared not only to speak about ethnic cleansing of Gaza again, but he also spoke about annexation of the West Bank to Israel. That means eliminating our homeland completely, leaving Palestinians without a country. And that is totally and absolutely rejected by Palestinians, and they will resist it with every power we have. And at the same time, I think it is very clear now that the ethnic cleansing plan of President Trump, which is a war crime, is rejected by everybody in the world. Not only the Arab countries, but the whole world. Nobody supported this plan except Israel and the United States of America. And now it seems that Netanyahu is not satisfied with one genocide. He wants to start another genocide in Gaza to fulfill this plan.
Mr. Barghouti, are you satisfied with how Arab nations are currently reacting and responding? Obviously, the king was put, in a difficult position today and caught by surprise. He didn't expect that press conference. He said he would take 2,000 Palestinian children, and that their preferred path was the two-state solution. And we've seen the Saudis reject this and the Qataris. But are you satisfied as a whole that the Arab nations are going to stand united and not throw Palestinians under the bus?
Yes, we are satisfied. And by the way, after the meeting, the foreign minister of Jordan made statements saying things that the king did not say publicly, but he said that the king told them to Trump, which is a total rejection of any idea of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. And that, of course, that Jordan is joining all the Arab countries in this position. But we need more from the Arab countries. What do we need? We need, first of all, that the language that is used with President Trump has to be more blunt, has to be very clear. This is the language he understands. Diplomatic talks and so on, he doesn't care about. He should be told clearly and frankly, and maybe he will be told that there is no place for this idea of ethnic cleansing, and there is no place for the idea of annexing the West Bank. Second, I think the Arab countries, especially the rich ones, the Gulf countries, have to prepare a safety net for Jordan and Egypt. If President Trump wants to cut financial aid to these countries, the Arab countries are capable of providing support to these countries to survive.
Do you think that
On the
that is
other
going
hand,
to happen?
I think yes. I think it's quite possible, and that's what we are demanding. And besides that, we want the Arab countries said they have an alternative plan for reconstruction in Gaza. We don't need the American money for that, but definitely we will not give Gaza to Mr. Trump. This is a country that has people. It is the homeland of Palestinians, and he has no right to speak not only about ethnic cleansing, but actually also about stealing Gaza from the Palestinians. That is unacceptable.
Mustafa Barghouti, we're really grateful that you've joined us here on the programme. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Donald Trump has been clear, albeit controversial, with his vision there of Gaza. We've been hearing about it for the last few days. And his comments on the future of Ukraine are also causing concern. In an interview with Fox News, the US president suggested Ukraine may be Russian someday. That's a quote from Donald Trump. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Sky News' analysis has revealed an increase in Ukrainian drone strikes against Russian oil depots, with Kyiv hitting targets hundreds of miles into Russian territory in defiance of air defences. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has this report.
A Russian oil refinery ablaze after a Ukrainian drone strike. There's been a ramping up of such operations over the past few weeks. An attempt, perhaps, to put pressure on Vladimir Putin as Donald Trump pushes for peace talks.
A Ukrainian intelligence source has told Sky News that Ukraine has significantly increased the production of drones to attack Russia, as well as improving their range and their accuracy. The source says one goal is to go after the fuel that powers Russian jets, warships and tanks. A second security source said another aim is to hit overall oil production, impacting the economy and raising the cost to Russia of its war.
In November, the Ukrainian military confirmed 4 strikes into Russia, with these 2 both involving oil infrastructure. The following month, oil depots and production plants are hit again in 4 locations, including this one the Ukrainians say is used to provide fuel for the Russian military. A 5th strike is against military infrastructure. By January, the strikes are even more intense, with 13 confirmed in total against oil targets, including 3 sites that are each hit twice. A 14th strike is against a microelectronics plant. Among the locations attacked twice is the Kristall oil depot, close to an airbase where Russia's strategic bombers are located. Satellite imagery shows the site before the attacks and after, where a fire is said to have burnt for 5 days. The Ryazan refinery is where another double strike took place. One of the 4 largest refineries in Russia, it was hit on the 24th of January and again the following day. As well as increasing in tempo, the drone strikes also show Ukraine's growing reach, such as these attacks on the 29th of January against an oil refinery and a pumping station that are 500 miles and 300 miles respectively from the Ukrainian border. And the attacks are continuing. But what's the actual effect on the ground?
It's genuinely difficult for us to know at this point how much impact this is having and whether it's really changing the mindset in the Kremlin, because you're talking about a country that's prepared to suffer hundreds of thousands of casualties and come under severe economic pressure. But the combination of these things, I would suggest the Ukrainian calculation must begin to alter Russian calculations about how long they can sustain this for.
The full scale of Ukraine's drone strikes into Russia is also unclear, as others have been reported but not officially confirmed. Either way, it's a capability Kyiv appears keen to keep using. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, we have had a flurry of diplomacy since January, and the Trump administration is now beginning to focus its attention on Moscow. This evening, the White House confirmed the release of an American man who was serving a 14-year prison sentence in a Russian penal colony. Well, this is Mark Fogel, a 63-year-old teacher from Pennsylvania, And he was travelling with medical marijuana that was prescribed for his back pain, and that's what he was arrested for. Well, let's go straight to Moscow now and speak to our Ivor Bennett. And Ivor, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor of the United States, said this release shows a good faith from the Russians and a sign we're moving in the right direction to end the brutal and terrible war in Ukraine. So some positive sort of statements there from the Americans about this. But also what I found interesting, Ivor, we've been talking a lot about the Middle East, and the name Steve Witkoff keeps coming up. You know, he was Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He's helped broker the ceasefire, and his name seems to have come up in this deal as well.
Yeah, that's right, Yalda. He seems to be Donald Trump's point man for tricky negotiations, because he is the one who was in Moscow today to secure this exchange, this deal that saw the release of this American citizen from a Russian prison. The first kind of word or hint we got was this morning. Reports of Steve Witkoff's plane landing in Moscow surface. That was neither confirmed nor denied by the Kremlin, but then suddenly it was announced this evening that Steve Witkoff was on his way back to the US with Mark Fogel in tow. Now, Mark Fogel is this 63-year-old former schoolteacher who was serving this 14-year sentence in a Russian prison for drug trafficking charges. He maintained that this marijuana he had on him when he was stopped at a Moscow airport in 2021 was for medical purposes only. But the Russians saw it differently, of course, and he, of course, missed out on that big prisoner exchange in August when the likes of Evan Gershkovich was released. But now, his family, having been outraged at him missing out on that, they are now speaking of their relief. They've said that this has been the darkest and most painful period of our lives, but today we begin to heal. That's a statement from them. But two important questions tonight, I think, in light of this news. One is, why is this happening now? And it seems this is all to do with the wider negotiations over Ukraine. Donald Trump has, of course, made it his mission to bring the war to a swift conclusion, and speculation has been building since his inauguration that there could be talks between him and Vladimir Putin at some point soon as he moves towards a potential peace deal with Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. Nothing has been concrete yet, though, only kind of speculation and signals. This seems to be the first piece of the puzzle that may have fallen into place. The second question, just very quickly, is what is Russia getting in return? Because in their statement, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor for the White House, he did call this an exchange, and we don't yet know what Russia's got. Is it just the promise of a more favourable peace deal on Ukraine, or is it something more concrete? We still don't know.
Ivor, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Well, I just want to bring you some latest pictures that have come in to us from the White House, where Donald Trump has been signing yet more executive orders. This time, he's discussing government efficiency and cutting down the size of the federal government. He's been joined in the room by Elon Musk. Let's just have a look.
Planes go.
So thank you very much. We had a busy day today. The king just left, and we've had a great discussion, terrific, concerning Gaza and everything else. We had discussions also about Saturday at 12 o'clock. It's going to be a big moment. We'll see what happens. I don't expect much happening with these people, but we'll see what happens. And we're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's Doge. And I'm going to ask Elon to tell you a little bit about it and some of the things that we found, which are shocking. Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's very serious. I think it's a very serious violation. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So the At a high level, if you say, what is the goal of Doge, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, aren't we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, okay, we would have to, if you sorry. So, I tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, or if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large, unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy. And if you looked at this, if you looked at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix. And then we've also got to address the deficit. So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense, and if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country. And it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about $30 million,
right,
et cetera?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So, we're looking at, if you look at, say, Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks. You've got comment fields that are also blank, so you don't know why the payment was made. And then we've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation, can take up to a year to get on the list, and even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing. So what we're talking about here, we're really just talking about adding common sense controls that should be present, that haven't been present. So they say, like, well, how could such a thing arise? That seems crazy. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical, I think. It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately. I'll tell you another crazy thing. So, one of the things is, like, we are trying to sort of right-size the federal bureaucracy, just make sure that this, obviously, there needs to be a lot of people working for the federal government, but not as many as currently. So we're saying, well, okay, if people can retire, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we were told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we were told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And I'm like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we can take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else. And you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way. So anyway, so I think, that's an example. Like at a high level, if you say, like, how do we increase prosperity, is we get people to shift from roles that are low to negative productivity to high productivity roles. And so you increase the total output of goods and services, which means that there's a higher standard of living available for everyone. That's the actual goal. Everyone's very quiet. Are people normally this quiet?
Your detractors, Mr. Musk.
What?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, And that's what people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
Mr. Musk, the White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are, in effect, policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's been, I don't know of a case where an organization has been more transparent than the Doge organization. So, and the kind of things we're doing are, I think, very, very simple and basic. They're not, what I mentioned, for example, about Treasury, just making sure that payments that go out, taxpayer money that goes out, is categorized correctly, that the payment is explained, that organizations on the do not pay list, which takes a lot to get there, that actually are not paid, which currently they are paid. These are not individual judgment decisions. These are about simply having sensible checks and balances in the system itself to ensure that taxpayer money is spent well. So it's got nothing to do with, like, say, a contract for some company of mine at all.
But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president, I know, has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say, like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately,
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits one of my companies or not? It's totally obvious.
And if we thought that, we would not let him do that segment or look in that area if we thought there was a lack of transparency or a conflict of interest. And we watch that also. He's a big businessman. He's a successful guy. That's why we want him doing this. We don't want an unsuccessful guy doing this. Now, one thing also that Elon hasn't really mentioned are the groups of people that are getting some of these payments. They're ridiculous. And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse. I would say those two words as opposed to the third word that I usually use, but in this case, fraud and abuse. It's abusive because most of these things are virtually made up, or certainly money shouldn't be sent to them. And you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. So, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found. And now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is corrupt. And it is very corrupt. It's very, very, it's also foolish. As an example, a man has a contract for 3 months and the contract ends, but they keep paying him for the next 20 years, because nobody ends a contract. You get a lot of that. You have a contract that's a 3-month contract. Now, normally, if you're in a small, in all fairness, it's the size of this thing is so big.
Yeah.
But if you have a contract and you're in a regular business, you end the contract in 3 months. It's a consultant. Here's a contract for 3 months, but it goes on for 20 years. And the guy doesn't say that he got money for 20 years, They don't say it. They just keep getting checks month after month. And you have various things like that, and even much worse than that, actually, much worse. And I guess you call that incompetence, maybe.
Yeah.
It could be corruption. It could be deals made on both sides, where the guy gets the money, he kicks. I think there's a lot of kickback here. I see a lot of kickback here.
There's a lot of kickbacks.
A tremendous kickback, because nobody could be so stupid to give out some of these contracts, so he has to get a kickback. So that's what I got elected for, that and borders and military and a lot of things, but this is a big part of it. And I hope that the court system is going to allow us to do what we have to do. We got elected to among other things, find all of this fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find. That will have quite an impact on the budget. And you'll go to a judge where they handpick a judge, and he has certain leanings. I'm not knocking anybody for that, but he has certain leanings. And he wants us to stop looking. How do you stop looking? I mean, we've already found it. We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants, illegal migrants, all illegal, I believe.
And they were being paid twice the normal room rate at 100% occupancy.
Unbelievable.
So it's a racket.
Mr. Musk, can I ask a question?
Well, if I may sort of just going for the President's comments, at a high level, you say, well, what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from $2 trillion to $1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be scrutinized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized.
At the White House, this came into us a few moments ago, and this meeting took place in the Oval Office, where Elon Musk has spoken about the need for Doge and the plans for Doge. Donald Trump is going to be signing an executive order. Elon Musk has been speaking for the last 10 minutes or so about the need to restore democracy and the problems that he has seemingly found in the bureaucracy, and why then Doge is such a necessity. He spoke about Donald Trump having a mandate, being elected by the American people to investigate all of the things that he is currently speaking about. Well, we've got our James Matthews with us now. Let's speak to James. James, I mean, this is sort of the Trump reality show that we see almost every evening, this show that gets played out, the executive orders that are signed. And tonight, it's Elon Musk's turn to perform and talk about what he has found, what he hasn't found. He's there with his little boy X in the Oval Office. What I thought was extraordinary was he spoke about these unelected representatives who have all of this power in the bureaucracy. And I guess the question that many Americans are asking about Elon Musk was, they understand they elected Donald Trump and many people, in the Senate and the House of Representatives, but Elon Musk isn't an elected representative.
Here, you're almost reversing it.
Yeah, exactly, Yalda. And, looking at these pictures, when the story of Donald Trump, certainly the Donald Trump second presidency is told, I think that picture will be near the top. Quite a remarkable event. That's the president of the United States justifying a full-scale assault on the federal government in the Oval Office with Elon Musk by his side. I mean, the most awkward news conference, starring the most awkward man with his son picking his nose, and Musk, talking as he does in slogans. And I think that's part of the problem, actually. This is an individual sent in to root out waste and abuse in government. I think most of the country is for that. What they haven't seen is accountability. That's the main criticism, and I'm not sure they got much of it there. But to your point about elected representatives, people voting for something and individuals to do their work, then no, we're not seeing that. Yes, Donald Trump ran on a platform of disrupting, of reforming government, and indeed rooting out waste. But nobody saw Elon Musk coming. Nobody saw the half dozen young men that have been sent into these federal agencies to sack people by the thousand. And as I say, to this point, not justify it, not deliver the kind of accountability and detailed justification that America
probably wants to see, certainly the workers at the heart of this want to see. I think, Yalda, actually, just let me refer to one line he came away with. If people can't vote and have their will decided by elected representatives, a president and a Senate, we don't have a democracy. He then said, we have this unconstitutional branch of government, the bureaucracy, doesn't match the will of the people. Well, the will of the people very much over time has been to construct a layer of bureaucracy to deal with America's interests, the interests of the people, whether that's social security payments or high finance. So, you know, describing bureaucracy as an unconstitutional branch of government is a stretch, to say the least. But what I would say, Yalda, is that I think they've been bounced into this by the objections of more than one judge around the country. Trump opened this news conference by talking about billions of waste and fraud. Hard to believe, he said, that a judge could say, we don't want you to weed out corruption. He called that a very serious violation. There is a debate going on here right now on the back of judges' objections on matters like sacking thousands at USAID, closing that down, the business of access to the Treasury's central payment system. Separate judges have said you cannot do that. And we see this debate now. Certainly Team Trump are leaning on the judges, leaning on the legal system, leaning on public opinion to say, look, that's my job. A judge should have nothing to do with it. So a degree of trying to railroad their legislation and their efforts through the courts right now.
James, thank you so much for summing that up for us. Well, let's bring in Bruno Macias, who is author and foreign correspondent for The New Statesman. Bruno, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. As James Matthews was saying there, just watching this play out from the Oval Office, listening to Elon Musk talk about this branch that are unelected officials, and yet there have been so many questions asked over the course of the last few weeks when we've seen the assault on USAID, on the Department of Education, on different branches being attacked by Elon Musk. And he's sent in people to look at US Treasury, for example, and some of the documents. There have been concerns that because people have asked questions, who elected Elon Musk?
Right. Well, I was watching in the green room, kind of mesmerized with chuckling. This was a pretty crazy setup, just out of a movie, perhaps. You don't see the Speaker of the House there. Yes, Franklin Roosevelt reformed the US government from bottom to top, but he did it through Congress. There's no Speaker of the House. There's Elon Musk, who has taken the role of the second branch of government. At the same time, Trump is saying some rather troubling things about the courts, calling the courts stupid, as I remember listening in the green room. And, you know, I was in Pakistan a couple of weeks ago and giving a talk, and I asked my audience of young students in Pakistan, imagine if in Pakistan, the wealthiest man in the country took over the Treasury payment system and decided who should get money and should not get money. What would the United States State Department say about that? What would world opinion say about that? And I think, you know, we should say the same thing, whether it's in Pakistan or whether it's in Washington.
I guess the question, you talk there about reform. Many would say, yes, there are aspects of USAID, for example, that needed to be reformed and that it wasn't necessarily the most efficient or effective at times mechanism. But it was part of American soft power. And it's not just about burning things down to the ground. Do they have a plan for reform of a lot of these things, or is it right now just slashing and burning?
Yes, there's two things there. First, reform has to be through law, by law, and that is not being done. It's sort of arbitrary, discretionary decisions by Elon Musk and a few of his people. So that, I think, is very troubling. It's not the way it should be done in a democracy under the rule of law. And second, as you say, I don't think this will work for American power. I used to say, not in the medium run, but I think even in the short run, we're already seeing that the conversations I listen to in Pakistan, then India, people are losing faith in America. And some cynics might say they never had it. No, they did have it. But this doesn't seem like the America they remember.
We often talk about Trump won, and the fact that there were guardrails in place, there were grown-ups in the room. He didn't quite know fully what to do. But we are seeing a different sort of Trump this time round.
Yes.
And we hear these phrases like flooding the zone, for example, so much information, so many executive orders being signed. We talked there about the fact that this feels like the Trump reality show, Trump world, and we're all in it, observing.
Right. Well, I think the difference is that this Trump 2, has an ideology. It's the Silicon Valley technocratic authoritarianism that has developed over the past 10 years. I saw it develop. I never thought it would take over, but, a set of circumstances just made it happen. And now Elon Musk represents that, but it's not just Elon Musk. It's a very ideological Trump. If we keep saying that Trump has no ideology, I don't think it reflects reality anymore.
Bruno, we'll come back to this issue in a moment, but we've actually got some breaking news that's come in the last few moments. Of course, for the last week or so, we have been talking about the developments, Donald Trump talking about Gaza, talking about taking Gaza, talking about owning Gaza. And of course, this hasn't gone down well in the Arab world. Today, President Trump met with the Jordanian king, and the Jordanian king was thrust almost into a live press conference, an improvised press conference where he was asked quite publicly about his plans. We heard the Jordanian king talk about taking 200 Palestinian children, but implied that with Donald Trump, they could actually, move ahead towards peace in the Middle East. Well, just in the last few minutes, we've had a statement now from the Egyptian Foreign Ministry saying its plans to outline a comprehensive plan to rebuild Gaza while ensuring that Palestinians remain on their land. So a statement there from the Egyptians who've said that they want to talk about the future of Gaza, which would be presented to Gaza. And of course, in the last few minutes, they've put out a statement from the Foreign Ministry saying our plans are comprehensive. It's to rebuild Gaza while ensuring that Palestinians remain on their land. Bruno, I'm going to bring this issue back to you and discuss with you about this because, of course, this has caught the Arab world, frankly, the entire international community by surprise here. Donald Trump saying that he wants to come up with an out-of-the-box scenario because, frankly, what we've seen isn't working. And he's now trying to push these states to the negotiating table, or maybe he's quite serious about a Gaza plan.
Yes, I tend to blame Biden as well because I think Biden set up the stage for what is happening now. With Gaza destroyed, these ideas are starting to circulate and to be taken very seriously. Now, the question is, how far can the destabilization go? I think we should start considering very seriously that the Egyptian and Jordanian regimes are now in mortal danger. Is that in the interest of the United States? You talked about how the U.S. is dismantling the system that it created and from which it withdraws so much power. And I think it's doing that in the Middle East as well. If those regimes collapse, it's not in the interest of the United States, it's not in the interest of Israel, but they're being put under enormous pressure right now.
What was extraordinary, I was just speaking to a Palestinian official who said, if Donald Trump threatens to cut Jordan's funds and funds to Egypt, and we know billions go into these countries, then the Gulf Arab states have enough funds to bankroll both Jordan and Egypt, and people need to get creative in other ways when it comes to this. I mean, the concern we're seeing, whether it's the messaging coming out of the EU, it's messaging coming out of the Middle East, it's concern in South American countries, is that perhaps America cannot be relied on and they need to start looking for partners elsewhere. And namely China. We've seen over the course of the last several presidencies, I mean, after Obama's pivot to Asia, we saw Donald Trump come up with a more hardline approach to China. We've seen Joe Biden push that as well. But this could actually push countries towards China.
I think it's happening already. We're starting to get news that China is stepping in where the U.S. is receding. And trying to pursue its plan of creating a global system to replace the American system. In the Middle East, China is being very cautious, obviously. This is a mess that was created by Washington, and China is watching. But we're also receiving news from Saudi Arabia that are not encouraging. Saudi Arabia is now talking about the Palestinian cause in a way that it hasn't talked since King Faisal. with a lot of passion in Saudi national TV. So perhaps the UAE will be willing to step in if the US withdraws, but Saudi doesn't seem willing to do that or to compromise its own reputation with these plans that everyone still is in the dark about. They are crazy plans, let's call it that, about rebuilding the Middle East, but rebuilding it on the basis of enormous destruction.
Well, we've covered so many issues with you this evening. I do want to talk about this AI summit. I have about a minute left on the programme. You've written a book about AI and the concerns around it, the challenges around it, but what works about it. We are now really in the age of AI and this race between the United States and China.
Yes, I think DeepSeek was a sort of a threshold. A watershed, really, because it showed that the reservoirs of talent and engineering capacity in China are higher than most people expected. And I think we should expect other surprises coming from China in the future. The box is now open. It was also important because I think the technology that China used for DeepSeek reveals that AI is now able to learn by itself with reinforcement learning, and so the process will accelerate from now on. I think 2025 will be a very interesting year.
Yeah. Well, Bruno, we're really grateful you've joined us. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, a lot of issues that we've covered on the programme tonight. The news at 10 is next with more on the state of the fragile Gaza ceasefire. And we've just had that breaking news coming in from Egypt that they are going to put together a comprehensive plan. From me and the team here on The World, good night.